Okay, let me ask you something. Have you ever been more worried about a shark attack at the beach than the actual drive to get there? Or maybe you felt that little knot in your stomach when you board a plane, even though you know it's way safer than getting in a car. Well, you are definitely not alone. In this explainer, we're diving into Daniel Gardner's The Science of Fear to figure out exactly why our brains are, frankly, so bad at judging risk, and, more importantly, what we can actually do about it.
So, here's what we're going to cover. First up, we'll look at your brain's ancient alarm system. Then, we'll get into the modern fear machine. Yep, how that old wiring gets exploited today. After that, we'll see what happens when all that fear starts making public policy. And finally, the good stuff, how you can tame that fear and take back control. All right, let's dive right in. The root of this whole issue? Well, you could say our brains are basically running on outdated software. I mean, seriously, this fear software was designed for a world that just doesn't exist anymore. A world full of immediate physical dangers, not the complex stuff we deal with today.
Right, this is the classic example, isn't it? I mean, think about it. The statistics are crystal clear. You're way more likely to get hurt in a car than on a plane. But for so many of us, the fear of flying is this huge, terrifying thing, while hopping in the car is just another Tuesday. It's this crazy paradox that really shows the massive gap between what feels dangerous and what actually is dangerous. And the reason for that gap? It starts deep inside our brains.
So let's meet the main culprit, the amygdala. You can think of this little almond-shaped thing as your brain's ancient, hardwired alarm system. And here's the key. It's not a thinker, it's a reactor. It's all instinct. The moment it even thinks it sees a threat, and it doesn't matter if it's real or just in your head, it slams the big red button and kicks off this massive biochemical chain reaction. And this is what happens when that alarm goes off. It's the fight or flight response. First, the amygdala just screams, "Danger!" Then your body gets flooded with stress hormones. We're talking adrenaline, cortisol, the works. And this stuff is like rocket fuel. Suddenly, your heart is pounding out of your chest. Your breathing gets shallow. Your senses are dialed up to 11. Your body is primed for action. And you know what? For our ancestors facing a real, physical predator, this was a brilliant, life-saving system.
But here's where we run into a huge problem. We've got this fundamental mismatch. That exact same system, the one designed to save us from saber-toothed tigers, is now getting triggered by all these abstract modern worries. To your amygdala, there's no difference between a real-life predator and a terrifying headline about the stock market. It just flips out, and that leads to this fear response that is just completely out of whack with the actual danger.
So it's not just our internal wiring that's the issue. Oh no. As if that wasn't enough, there are external forces in our world today that have gotten really good at pushing our fear buttons, often for their own benefit. And this just throws our already skewed perception of risk even further off balance.
And this slide just lays it out perfectly, doesn't it? Look at the disconnect. The media loves things that are rare, dramatic, and super visual. I mean, shark attacks, plane crashes, that's gripping TV, right? But the stuff that's actually most likely to get us, things like heart disease, diabetes, even just car accidents, they're common. They're not as flashy, so they get way less airtime. And what we end up with is this constant, skewed picture of the world that is just not based in reality.
So why does this media blitz work so well on our poor, ancient brains? Well, there's a name for it. It's a mental shortcut called the availability heuristic. And it's pretty simple, really. Our brains have this little rule of thumb. If I can think of an example of something really easily, it must happen a lot. So, because those stories about plane crashes are so dramatic and stick in our minds, our brain goes, whoa, plane crashes must be super common. Meanwhile, the millions of totally safe flights that happen all the time, they don't even register.
And make no mistake, as Daniel Gardner points out in his work, this is not some random accident. It's a business model. The media figured this out a long time ago. Fear sells. Those sensational headlines, the dramatic music, the urgent language, it's all a toolkit designed specifically to poke your amygdala and keep your eyes glued to the screen. It's all about engagement, and fear is one heck of an engagement tool.
Okay, so this is where it gets really serious. This whole miscalibrated fear thing. It isn't just a personal problem that makes you nervous on a flight. When an entire society gets afraid of the wrong things, it can have huge real-world consequences. It can actually start to shape the laws and policies that govern all of our lives.
And we've seen this play out time and again. Think about it. After major terrorist attacks, a wave of fear led to things like the USA Patriot Act. Now, the stated goal was, of course, to increase safety, but it kicked off this huge debate about privacy and civil liberties. Or take the recent pandemic.
Immense fear of the virus led to policies like lockdowns. The goal is to curb the spread, but the unintended consequences were massive social and economic disruption. The point is, when public fear gets intense, there's enormous pressure on governments to do something, and those actions almost always involve really difficult trade-offs.
And that's really the crux of it, isn't it? Navigating this stuff is incredibly tricky. When a whole society is gripped by fear, the pressure to choose safety over everything else becomes immense. But trying to find that perfect balance, that sweet spot where we feel safe but without sacrificing the freedoms we value, that is one of the toughest balancing acts for any society.
So, what are we supposed to do about all this? It can feel a little hopeless, right? Like we're just puppets of our ancient brains in the 24-hour news cycle. But we're not, and that's what this last section is all about, giving you a practical toolkit to take back control and start thinking more rationally about risk.
All right, here's your new playbook. First, and this is a big one, learn to rely on actual statistics, not just dramatic stories. Second, get in the habit of thinking critically about the media you're seeing. Ask yourself, what's the story they're trying to sell me? What are they leaving out? Third, you have to know your own brain's tricks. Understand your biases, like that availability heuristic we talked about. And finally, and this is key, you have to learn to actively push back against those irrational thoughts. So let's break down exactly how you do that.
Here is a super practical technique you can use, and it comes from cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. It's a simple 3-step process. Step 1, just notice and name the fearful thought. You know, that voice in your head saying, flying is extremely dangerous. Step 2, challenge it with cold, hard facts. You literally talk back to it. Actually, the statistics show that flying is much, much safer than driving. And step 3, you replace that bad thought with a more rational one. Something like, okay, this feeling of fear is just an emotion. It is not a fact about the world.
So, when you boil it all down, understanding how fear works gives you a choice. A really important one. You can let your ancient programming and the modern fear machine call the shots, making you worry about all the sensational, flashy stuff that probably won't happen. Or you can choose to use reason, to look at the evidence, and to focus your energy on the real risks and the real opportunities in your life. Now that you know how it all works, the question is, what are you going to choose to be afraid of?